Hello, and welcome to Blender. Today we're going to take a look at how to create a 3D image. The image that I've selected for us today is that of a balloon. If you will give your attention now to the center of the screen, you will note that there is currently a cube there. This is known as a mesh. This particular mesh we'll remove in a few seconds, but first let us change our viewpoint from its current location to a much better one to get a feel for our object. To do so, we're going to first press 1 on our keyboard and then 5 on our numpad to change our perspective to that of a front and orthographic view. From here, we'll have a better understanding and feel for our shape. Now, let's zoom in. We'll use our mouse wheel and scroll down to zoom in on our object. Now that we're firmly looking at it, let us delete it by pressing Shift and then X to bring up the selection, and then click on Delete to remove the object from the field. Now, to add a new object, we're going to press Shift A, and then we're going to scroll up to our mesh location, come down, and choose the UV sphere, which will then add a UV sphere to the middle. From here, we're going to do one small tweak by pressing F6 on our keyboard to change the number of segments and rings. What this will do is it will remove some of the vertices on the object to allow us to easily create the balloon shape we're looking for. To do so, click on the segment section and simply type in 12, and the rings, we're going to change that down to 12 as well. Now, our shape looks slightly better with a lot less rings. We're now going to press our Tab key to go into edit mode. Next, we're going to press Ctrl plus space to remove our X-axis and our axis manipulators. This allows us to remove some of the clutter on our screen. Now, let us remove everything that we have selected by hitting A. This will unselect every vertices. And from here, we're going to select our bottom two. To do so, you might need to scroll in just a little to see what we're looking for. So I will do that right now by moving my mouse wheel. Now that I have a slightly better view, let's move down just a little bit. Now that I have a slightly better view of the bottom of our balloon, let us select our bottom two vertices. To do so, press Alt and then right-click on our second to lowest vertices. This will highlight the entire vertices. Now, holding down Shift plus our right-click, we'll choose our bottom vertex point, which will give us the selection of the entire of the bottom of the balloon. From here, we're going to turn on our proportional editing by pressing O, which you can also do by pressing this button down here and then choosing Enable. Then, we're going to grab it by pressing G, and then pressing Z to lock it to our Z axis. If we don't press Z, we'll be able to move the object around all the axes such as this. By pressing Z, you'll note that you'll no longer be able to move it left and right. You'll only be able to move it up and down. So what we're going to do is pull the balloon down. We're going to scroll in with our middle mouse button to change the proportional editing as we do so to get a nice balloon feel to our object. You can play around with this until you get a look that you particularly like. When you find the desired location, simply left-click to make the change permanent. I'm going to scroll down again by holding down Shift and moving my mouse button, and then scroll in some more until I can get a view that looks a little bit better for what we're about to do next. Okay, for this part, we're going to pull the bottom part of our balloon down to make the knot. This is probably the most tricky part of what we're doing in this section. To do this, we're going to need to both scale and extrude this bottom part of this balloon. To do this tricky exercise, the first thing we need to do is put our mouse pointer over here in the bottom right hand side. Then we want to push E for extrude, S for scaling, and then press our middle mouse button to do this across the x-axis. Then take your cursor and scale it in toward the balloon to make this particular vertices smaller. Do so until you get to the part where you think it will look good, and then left click to make it permanent. Now we're going to turn off our proportional editing. This time, instead of pressing O, we'll go down and click on the button and choose Disable. Now we want to pull down our object. So go ahead and press G for grab, which will then pull down across our Z axis. If you don't have it turned on, press Z and make sure you have the white line. If not, remember that you can mess up your object by pulling it off the Z axis. But simply pressing Z will put it back onto the Z axis. Pull it down until you get a shape that you like. Then left click. At this point, we will now press E to extrude. And we will now pull down a section which will now become our knot. Let's now zoom in on this particular section of our balloon. This part, our knot, we're going to add in a couple of loop cuts so that we can do some further editing to this section. To add a loop cut, put your cursor over the knot and press Ctrl R, which will bring up a purple line, and then press the number 2 to tell Blender to make it 2 loop cuts instead of 1. Left click to make these permanent. What this does is adds 2 new vertices in this section that we can now play with. Now we can go ahead and scale these loop cuts up by pressing S and then simply pulling our mouse cursor out to the right to make them larger. Left click when you get to the part where you think it looks nice. From here, we will now grab them and pull them down along the Z axis to cover up the bottom part of our balloon. This will give us what will become the knot. If we press Z on our keyboard, we'll be able to bring the image into wireframe, and we'll be able to see what is underneath the section that we just pulled down. Do so now, and then select the middle vertices, and then press G to pull it up across the Z axis to give more of an indent at the bottom of our balloon. Left click when you get to a position where you like. From here, we're going to add in one more loop cut by pressing Ctrl R and then left clicking, and then here, once you've left clicked one time, you can then move and scale up and down where you want this vertices to go in. Once you find where you think you want it, left click, and then we're going to scale this down so it looks more like a balloon. It's not at the bottom. If you're not particularly happy with any of these changes, or if you want to change this vertices right here to make it smaller, just remember to Alt right click to select the entire vertices, and then you can move it by hitting G for grab, Z for on the Z axis, and you can pull it down to a size that might look slightly better. For this case for me, it'll be right here. Now we're almost done with what we're going to do with this tutorial today. The last thing we're going to do is going to zoom out, press Z to turn off our wireframe, and what we're going to do now is add in a subsurf modifier. To do that, we're going to move over here to our toolbar and select the object modifiers that looks like a wrench, and then come down to Add Modifier, come down to Subdivision Surface, and left click on this. This will bring up our Abilities modifier. Let me make this screen slightly larger. And what we're going to do from here is we're going to change our view, our render down to 1, and change our optimal display and turn that on. The last thing we'll do is under the mesh tools is we're going to change this to smooth. So scroll down until you see shading and click on smooth. Now if you don't see any major changes, you might want to press tab to select all the vertices before pressing smooth, which is what did not work for me, so come back down to shading and press smooth, and then you can press tab to turn it off, and when you zoom in, you'll note that now your balloon is looking much nicer. As we rotate around it, we'll see that it looks very smooth and much more like a balloon. And if we scroll down to our knot, you'll see that it's getting the basic shape of a balloon knot. Now from here we can make further changes and add more detail to our balloon. We can then go further in and add in different types of materials to make the balloon look transparent, add in color, add in a background if we desire. We can also add in a string. We could tie that around our bottom of our balloon and pull it down, which I would love to be able to go into, but that would take roughly another 45 minutes to another hour to get to that particular point. But I do want to show you very briefly of what this will eventually look like when we finish. So I'll pull that screen up now. Now here I have a finished product. This is from our basic balloon, the very one that we were working on earlier. This was created from just one balloon object that we then used Blender to multiply into multiple different balloons. We then went in and changed the color to both green, blue, red, and yellow. We had strings attached that came down to one per focal point. We added in a material to give them a transparency look, added in a backdrop, as well as some different effects and lighting. This is just a very basic step of what Blender can do. It can do very many different functions, from creating objects like this to creating animated movies such as you might have seen from Up. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial today, and if you have any questions, please contact me. And I hope you have a great day and you have fun with Blender. Enjoy!